The first thing you need to understand is that a car cannot get into level B3 without passing 3 camera zones, 2 gate arms, and the desk where I sit for 9 hours a night. That's not an opinion. That's how the building was designed. I've worked the overnight security shift at the Halsted-Crane complex for 11 years. And before that, I did 4 years at a hospital parking structure across the river, so I know what a controlled garage is supposed to look like. A car does not just show up. It badges in, or it tailgates somebody who badges in, or it comes off a flatbed. There is always a record. There is always a way it got there. Except for the gray sedan in space 314. I'm going to try to tell this the way I'd tell it if I were sitting across a desk from you, giving a statement. I'm not a writer. I write incident reports, the kind with a timestamp and a location field and a box for action taken, and I've written a lot of them about this. So if I sound flat, that's why. I've already lived the dramatic version in my head 100 times, and it didn't help. The flat version is the true one. Let me set the place first, because the place matters more than anything. The Halsted-Crane complex is 2 towers and a shared podium in the middle of downtown. The kind of building with a bank branch and a sandwich place on the ground floor, and 40 floors of law firms and insurance offices, and 1 floor of some company nobody can explain stacked on top. Underneath it, there are 4 parking levels. B1 is the nice one, valet and reserved. Spaces for the partners and the executives, close to the elevator lobby with the good lighting. B2 is monthly tenants, the regular employees who pay $290 a month to not take the train. B3 and B4 are overflow event parking, the stuff that fills up maybe 4 days a year and otherwise sits mostly empty. B3 is where I spend most of my patrol time, and I'll tell you why. It's the level people forget. It's deep enough that cell signal drops to 1 bar. The fluorescent tubes down there run on an older circuit, so about 1 in 5 is always flickering or dead, and the work order to replace them has been scheduled for as long as I've worked there. The ceiling is lower than the upper levels by maybe 8 inches, which you don't notice with your eyes, but you notice in your chest. There are 62 painted concrete pillars, each one stenciled with the level, and the section in that flaking traffic yellow paint, B3-A, B3-B, all the way to B3-F. The drainage grates down there run constant even in a dry month. This thin trickle sound that follows you between pillars. There's an exhaust fan bank in the northeast corner that cycles on and off on a timer. And when it kicks on, it makes a low shudder you can feel in the floor. B3 has 19 security cameras. I know because I'm the one who has to note it when one goes down. They feed up to the monitor wall at my desk in the dispatch booth on B1. 16 screens cycling through camera groups. The booth has the gate logs, the access control terminal, the parking management software that the property managers upstairs use to track who has a monthly permit and who's a daily, the citation printer for tickets, the radio, and a coffee machine that I bought myself because the company one died in 2019. The routine is the spine of this whole thing. So let me give it to you straight. I come on at 9 at night. I relieve the evening guy, Marcus, who tells me whatever happened on his shift, which is usually nothing. Around 10, the building empties out except for a few late workers and the cleaning crews. Midnight, I do a full-foot patrol, all 4 levels, badge. The checkpoints, there are little wall-mounted readers at 8 spots, and I have to tap my badge at each one so the system knows I actually walked the route and didn't just sit at the desk. 2 a.m. I do it again. 4 a.m. I do it again. Then there's the early sweep at 5:15, which is the important one because that's before the cleaning crew comes through at 5:30. And the first office workers start trickling into B1 and B2 around 6:15, 6:30. At the 5:15 sweep is where I found it the first time. It was a Tuesday in early March. And I want to be honest that I almost didn't write it up. I came down the ramp from B2 to B3 on foot, flashlight in hand, even though the lights were on, because half of patrol is just looking like you're patrolling. I came around the pillar at B3-C, and there was a car in space 314. A dark gray sedan. Older model, the kind of mid-size four-door that's so common it's basically invisible. The car your brain files under car and forgets. Clean but not new. Parked dead center in the space, perfectly straight, nose in. My first thought was, somebody worked late and left their car. That happens. Lawyers pull all-nighters. People have a few drinks and Uber home and leave the car. No mystery there. But it bugged me a little because B3 was empty when I'd patrolled at 4. I'd swear to it. And space 314 is not where you'd leave a car if you worked late. It's deep in the C section, far from the elevator, in a level nobody uses. If you're a tired lawyer at 1 in the morning, you park in B1 or B2 by the elevator. You don't drive down 2 more levels into the dark to park in the worst spot in the building. So I walked up to it, and that's when the small wrong things started. The ones I didn't understand were the whole story yet. No license plates, front or back, not a temporary tag, not a dealer plate, nothing. Just the smooth, painted bumper where a plate bracket should be. No parking permit on the dash, no monthly decal on the windshield, no daily ticket on the seat. To even be on B3, you have to come through a gate, and the gate either reads your monthly transponder or spits out a paper ticket. There was nothing. The windows were tinted, not blackout, just enough that at 5 in the morning in that flickering light, I had to cup my hands to the glass to see in. Empty. Clean interior. Gray cloth seats. Nothing on the seats. Nothing on the floor. The driver's seat was reclined back a little, like somebody tall had been sitting in it. I tried the doors out of reflex. Locked. I put my flashlight to the windshield where the VIN should be. That little metal strip at the base of the glass on the driver's side. Every car made in the last 40 years has one. It was there, but it was blank. Just a bare metal plate with no number stamped into it. I figured it was scratched off or worn. Told myself I'd look closer in better light, and I went back up to the desk and ran the cameras. This is the part I keep coming back to. I pulled up the B3 camera group for the overnight. Camera 11 covers the C section, points right down the row that includes 314. I scrubbed back from 5:15. I watched the car sitting there. I scrubbed back through 4:34, 3:30, car sitting there. Kept going. 2:32, and the car's still there, which didn't match my memory of patrolling at 4 and seeing an empty level. But I told myself I must have just not looked down that row. It was dark, whatever. I kept scrubbing back to find the moment it arrived. 1 a.m. There. Midnight there. I went all the way back to 9 p.m. when I came on shift. The car was in 314 the entire time, in every frame, the whole night. It's not possible, because Marcus does a walkthrough at the end of his shift, and logs B3 is clear, and I saw the level empty at midnight on my own patrol, but there it was on camera, sitting in 314 from 9 p.m. forward like it had always been there. So I did the obvious thing. I checked the gate logs. The entry gate to the garage records every vehicle transponder, ID and time, or daily ticket issued and time. I pulled the full log for the night. Nothing entered that could be that car. Every entry matched a known monthly tenant or a dispensed daily ticket that I could account for. There was no orphan entry, no ticket issued, never paid, nothing. A car that's on camera all night. Parked. but never came through the gate. I want to be clear about my state of mind because this is where a lot of these stories go wrong. I did not think ghost. I thought system error. I have seen the camera system glitch and loop footage. I have seen the gate log drop entries when the network hiccups. I have seen all of it. So my honest, boring conclusion that first morning was, the cameras are buggy and somebody got in through a malfunctioning gate, probably tailgating behind a tenant, and parked weird, and I'll tow it if it's still there tomorrow. I wrote a short incident report. Unattended vehicle B3-C space 314. No plates/permit, no matching gate entry. Monitoring. Time stamped 5:42 a.m. I filed it. I went home. I slept like a normal person. The car was there the next morning. And here's the thing, it was there in the same way. Not still there. There. When I came down at 5:15 on Wednesday, the level had been empty on my 4 a.m. patrol. I was sure of it this time because I'd specifically walked the whole C row, 314 empty oil-stained concrete, and a faded yellow number on the wall. And at 5:15, the gray sedan was in 314, parked dead straight, nose in. I went back up and pulled the cameras and went through the exact same nothing. Car visible all night on camera 11. No gate entry. But this time I noticed something I'd missed. Camera 11 has a timestamp burned into the corner, running seconds. I was scrubbing through the 4 a.m. window, the time when I patrolled and seen the space empty trying to catch the car arriving. And the timestamp jumped. It went from 4:02:58 to 4:03:04. 6 seconds gone. The frame before, empty row. The frame after, the car in 314, 6 seconds. The camera dropout, networks do that, but I checked the other B3 cameras for the same window, 9, 10, 12, the ones that catch the edges of the C section and the ramp and the only routes a car could take to get to 314. Every single one of them dropped the same 6 seconds. 4:02:58 to 4:03:04. Across 9 cameras on, I later confirmed, 3 separate recording servers. You don't get a coordinated 6-second dropout across 3 servers from a network hiccup. That's not how the architecture works. I know because I had to learn it for the job. That was the first night I stayed an extra hour after my shift ended, sitting at the desk, not going home, watching that car on the monitor and trying to make it make sense. I'm gonna skip ahead a little because the next 2 weeks were mostly me doing my job badly, meaning I was distracted, running the same checks over and over, getting the same nothing. But a few things from those 2 weeks matter. The car came every morning, every single morning. Always 3:14. Always between my 4 a.m. patrol and my 5:15 sweep. Always a 6-second dropout across all the relevant cameras. The timestamp never quite the same minute, but always in that window. And it was not exactly the same car each morning. That's the part that started to get under my skin in a way the impossible camera stuff hadn't. The impossible stuff felt technical, like a puzzle. The small changes felt personal. The driver's seat was reclined differently on different mornings. Some days flat back, some days upright, pushed forward like a short person had driven it. The odometer, I started photographing it through the windshield with my phone pressed to the glass, changed. Not resetting, not random, climbing. Like the car was being driven somewhere. Mileage I could measure. 40 miles one night, 60 another, and then parked back in 314 by morning. Except it never moved on camera. It sat in that space all night, every night, and added miles to its odometer while it sat there. One morning the hood was warm. I put my palm flat on it the way you do. and it had that engine heat coming through, the tick of a cooling motor, even though the car had supposedly been parked and motionless for 8 hours on my own footage. One morning the tires were wet, beaded water on the rubber and a little wet arc on the concrete behind each tire where it had rolled in. It hadn't rained in 9 days. The garage is dry. There is no water source on B3 except the drainage grates, and the car wasn't near one. And one morning the radio was on. I had my hand cupped to the driver's window, looking in at that reclined seat, and I heard it. Faint, tinny, like a speaker turned almost all the way down. Music, an old song, the kind of thing that plays on the AM oldies station. Strings and a crooner, I couldn't tell you the name. There was no key in the ignition. The dash was dark. The car was locked and dead, and the radio was playing, just barely, like it was coming from somewhere far away, and the car was only repeating it. I stood there in that flickering light, with the exhaust fans shuddering on and the drainage trickling, and that little dead radio playing an old song to an empty seat. And for the first time I felt the specific kind of fear this whole thing is made of. Not a jump, not a scream. Just the floor of the normal world tilting a couple of degrees, enough that you have to put a hand out. I'm 58 years old. I've found bodies in this job. A man who'd had a heart attack in his car on B1, a couple of overdoses over the years, a jumper once at the hospital. I'm not squeamish and I don't spook, but I backed away from that car that morning, and I didn't turn my back on it until I was around the pillar. Let me tell you about Eddie, because I should have told you about Eddie already. Eddie Salas was the overnight garage attendant when I started 11 years ago, back when the building still had a manned attendant booth at the B1 ramp before they automated it. Eddie was maybe 10 years older than me, a quiet guy, a sweeper-upper, the kind of employee who knew every inch of a place because he'd spent 20 years walking it at 2 a.m. with nobody to talk to. He used to tell me the building stories. He's the one who first told me B3 ran heavy, which was his phrase for a place that wears on you. He didn't mean haunted. Eddie wasn't superstitious. He meant the way some shifts just sit on your chest. Eddie retired, or I thought he retired about a year after I started. One week he was there, the next week he wasn't, and the day shift supervisor said Eddie had put in his papers. I didn't think twice. People retire. I was new and busy. I never got a goodbye, but Eddie wasn't a goodbye kind of guy. I'm telling you about Eddie now because of what I found when I finally did the thing I should have done in week 1, which was go into the old incident reports. Our incident reporting system only goes back digitally to 2014, when the management company switched software. Anything before that is paper in boxes in a storage room off the loading dock that the building engineer, a guy named Roy Petrock, has the only reliable key to. Roy's been the building engineer for 31 years. He knew the place when it was being built. If anybody understood the bones of Halsted-Crane, it was Roy. I went to Roy about 3 weeks in. I didn't lead with, "There's a ghost car." I'm not stupid. I led with, "I've got a vehicle that keeps showing up on B3 with no gate record, and I want to check if it's happened before." Procedural, reasonable. The kind of thing a supervisor checks. Roy got quiet in a way I didn't expect. He's a talker normally. He asked me what space. I said 314 B3-C. And Roy put down his coffee and said, "There's no 314. I told him there was. I'd been standing next to the painted number every morning for 3 weeks. He said, "On the current map, maybe?" There's no 314 on the original. B3 only went up to 290 something. They renumbered after. After what? I asked. and Roy told me about the flood. I'm going to give you the version Roy gave me because it matters and because it's the first piece of the actual history. The Halsted-Crane complex was built in the early 80s on a site that used to be something else, a rail yard, then a warehouse, then nothing for a while. When they dug the foundation and the parking levels, they hit the water table lower than the engineers expected. The original design had a B4 and a partial fifth level, a B5, that was meant to be the deepest parking and some mechanical space. During construction, before the building ever opened, there was a flood. A combination of groundwater and a burst something Roy wasn't sure. He was new then, too, filled the bottom of the excavation. 2 construction workers were down there when it happened. One got out, one didn't. The company didn't want a lawsuit and a delay and a haunted building reputation before they'd leased a single floor. So they made a decision that Roy said was technically legal and morally rotten. They sealed the bottom level, poured it, capped the ramp, walled off the access, and revised the drawings so that the lowest parking level became B4, and the sealed level simply stopped existing on paper. The renumbering rippled up. Spaces got renumbered. And somewhere in that renumbering, B3 picked up a row of spaces in the C-section that on the original drawings had been part of the ramp down to the level that no longer existed. Space 314 sits on what used to be the top of the ramp to B5. Roy told me the dead worker's name was Daniel Okafor. He told me there was supposed to be a settlement, quiet money to the family, and that he didn't know if it ever got paid. And he told me one more thing, almost as an afterthought, the kind of thing an old man says when he's already said more than he meant to. He said Eddie used to park down there in the C row. He said it was the only quiet spot in the building. I always told him not to. I asked Roy when he'd last seen Eddie. Roy looked at me for a second and said, "Eddie didn't retire, Frank. Eddie went down to do his end-of-shift sweep one morning and didn't come back up. They found his cart and his keys on B3. Never found him. Management put out that he retired because they didn't want another B3 story. That was," he counted, "that was about 10 years ago, right after you started. I want to stop here and tell you what I felt because it's the emotional center of this whole thing, and if I skip it, I'm lying to you. I felt sick, not scared sick, because I remembered, now that Roy said it, that there had been a week early in my time there when the cops came around and asked me a couple of questions about a missing employee, and I'd answered them like it was a formality because I was new and didn't know Eddie well, and I wanted to keep my job and not get tangled in something. I'd said I didn't know anything, which was true. But I remembered a woman, to Eddie's daughter, I think, or maybe his sister, who'd come to the building once, weeks after, asking to see the security footage from the night her father disappeared. And I directed her to the management office because that was the procedure. And the management office had stonewalled her. And I'd watched her leave through the lobby and never thought about her again for 10 years. I'd had a chance once to take a missing man seriously, and I'd treated it like paperwork. And now his quiet spot in the C row was throwing up a car that didn't exist every single morning on top of a ramp to a level that didn't exist where a man had drowned before the building ever opened. That's when it stopped being a puzzle for me. That's when it became something I owed. So I started actually digging on my own time, which for a night shift guy means the dead hours between patrols. I got into the old paper reports. Roy let me into the storage room. He didn't want to, but I think he was tired of carrying it alone. The boxes were a mess, water-stained themselves, ironically, but I'm patient and I had a lot of nights. I was looking for any mention of B3-C space 314 or the spaces around it. I found 3 things. The first was a cluster of incident reports from the late 80s and 90s, all about a vehicle. Different descriptions, each time a dark sedan, a gray older model car, once a black 4-door, possibly abandoned, but always the same location, that C row. And always the same problem. No plates, no permit, no record of entry, and the reporting guard noting that it hadn't been there the previous round. Different guards, different decades, the same exact event I was living. One report from 1994 had a note clipped to it in a supervisor's handwriting. Towed March 12th, returned March 13th. Do not log further. Do not log further. Somebody 30 years ago had decided the easiest thing was to stop writing it down. The second thing was a tow company file. There was a manila folder of correspondence with a towing outfit, Brandt & Sons, going back years. Repeated work orders to remove an unidentified vehicle from B3, and repeated refusals or failures. One letter from Brandt & Sons, dated 2001, was the closest anybody ever came to saying it plainly. The owner had written in response to yet another request, "We will not be sending another truck to your B3. The last operator we sent, against my advice, hooked the vehicle and got it as far as the B2 ramp before it came off the hook on a flat grade with the brake set, which is not possible, and rolled back down. He will not return to your property. Find another company." It came off the hook on a flat grade, rolled back down to 314. The third thing was the worst, and I found it last, near the bottom of a box, and it's the one I think about when I can't sleep. It was a single incident report, filled out in Eddie's handwriting. I knew his handwriting from the old logbook, dated about 2 weeks before he disappeared. It described the car, same space. And in the action taken box, Eddie hadn't written monitoring or towed or any of the normal things. Eddie had written, "Recognize the receipt on the seat. It's mine. Going to wait for it Tuesday." There was a grocery receipt on the seat of the car the morning Eddie wrote that, and Eddie recognized it as his own. "I told you the car's interior changed. Reclined seats, the odometer, the radio. I hadn't told you yet that things appeared inside it." After Roy's history and Eddie's report, I started really documenting the interior, photographing it every morning, and the objects were the part I couldn't explain away with any system glitch, because systems don't put objects on seats. It started small. A toll ticket on the passenger seat one morning, from a tollway I didn't recognize. The printing faded. A motel key tag a few mornings later, the old plastic diamond kind with a room number and an address embossed in it. The motel a place out on a state route, 2 hours from the city. An old parking stub from a structure that, when I looked it up, had been demolished in 2003. A child's car seat left a clear imprint in the back seat cushion one morning. The 4 indents where the base bolts down, though there was no seat in the car. These weren't random. I want to be precise about that, because the randomness would almost have been comforting. They were specific, and they were old, and they belonged to people. Each object felt like it had been carried by somebody, used, lived with, and then left in that car. The motel key tag had a phone number on the back in faded marker, a woman's name, "Call Denise." The grocery receipt that I eventually got a clear photo of, the one that post-dated Eddie's. A new one, a different morning, had items on it that I recognized, because they were the things I buy. The brand of coffee I keep at the desk, because the company machine died. The specific over-the-counter thing I take from my knee. Store brand bread, 2% milk, the boring grocery list of a man who lives alone and eats badly on the night shift. A receipt with my groceries on it on the seat of a car that doesn't exist, in a space that was renumbered to hide a level where a man drowned, where another man I failed to look for disappeared after recognizing his own receipt. On that same seat, that's the shape of it. That's the whole shape. And I figured it out before I wanted to. I tried the rational responses. I owe it to you to say I really did try. I called the police non-emergency line and reported an abandoned vehicle formally with all the details I could give that wouldn't get me a psych referral. An officer came, a young guy, polite. He ran the lack of plates, looked at the blank VIN strip, tried the doors. He filled out a report. He told me a vehicle with no plates and no VIN was a tow and impound situation, and he'd flag it for the city tow contractor. He was standing right next to the car when his radio cut out, just dead air, for about 6 seconds, and he frowned at it and smacked it, and it came back. And he didn't think anything of it, but I did. He left. The city tow never came. When I followed up, there was no record of the flag in their system. The officer's own report, when I requested a copy, had the location field blank. Not 314, not B3. Blank. Like the form had refused to record where it was. I tried to get management to act. I went to the property manager, a woman named Claire Voss, who runs the building for the ownership group, and I laid out a clean, non-crazy version. Persistent unidentified vehicle, security and liability concern, documented over 6 weeks. Recommend we resolve it. Claire listened to about 90 seconds of it, and her face did a thing I recognized from Roy, a kind of door closing. She told me the ownership group was aware of the historical sensitivities around the lower levels, and that the matter was handled at a level above the building, and that I should log it and leave it. Log it and leave it. 30 years later, the same instruction, in nicer clothes. I tried to boot it myself. We have a wheel boot in the dispatch booth for chronic permit violators. I put it on the front driver's side wheel one morning, cranked it tight, photographed it, logged it. The next morning, the boot was sitting neatly on the concrete behind the car, unlocked, undamaged, the key still in my pocket. The car had moved forward maybe a foot out of the space and back into it, just enough to shed the boot like a dog stepping out of a collar, and then settled dead center again. I tried one morning to just not go down at 5:15, to break the routine. To see if the routine was part of it, I sat at the desk and I watched the clock go past 5:15. And I watched the B3 monitor, camera 11, the empty C row. And at 5:17, the feed dropped 6 seconds and came back with the car in 314. And then camera 11 did something it had never done. It panned. We don't have pan tilt cameras on B3, they're fixed. But camera 11 panned slowly off the car across the row and came to rest, pointed straight at the little wall-mounted badge reader at the B3-C checkpoint. The one I tap every patrol. It held there, like it was showing me something, like it was waiting for me to come tap in. I went down. Of course I went down. You always go down. Now I have to tell you about the last morning, and then I'll tell you the part I haven't told to anyone, and then I'll stop. By then, it was late April. 7 weeks. I hadn't slept right in a month. I'd stopped trying to explain it to anyone because Roy had gone quiet on me. He'd started taking vacation days. Then he put in for retirement, real retirement, and the last thing he said to me in the hallway was, Don't wait for it, Frank. Whatever it's getting ready to do, don't be the one waiting for it. And then he was gone. And it was just me and Claire stonewalling, and a car that was, I was now sure, getting ready to do something because the objects had stopped being other people's. The last week, everything in the car was mine. The coffee brand, the knee medicine, a paperback I'd lost months ago turned up on the dashboard, my actual copy with the dog ear I'd put in it. The driver's seat stopped changing and settled into one position and stayed there. And the morning I finally sat in my own car in the employee lot and compared, the position matched mine exactly, the recline, the distance from the wheel, the mirror angle. The radio played the song my mother used to play, the specific one, which I had never told a living person about because why would I? And the odometer stopped climbing. It sat at a number and held. I want to tell you, it was a meaningless number. It was my badge number, 6 digits, my employee badge number, sitting on the odometer of the car like total mileage. The morning of the last day, the access control terminal at my desk threw an alert I'd never seen. A new permit assignment had been auto-generated in the parking management software. Monthly reserved space, tenant name, the works. The tenant name on the new permit was mine. Frank, I'll keep my last name out of this. My name. The assigned space was B3-C314. Reserved, permanent. The software showed it as active, effective immediately with a start date and no end date. The end date field showing 4 dashes the way it does for permits that don't expire. And under vehicle, where it should list a plate or a transponder, it listed the transponder ID of my own car, the one parked upstairs in the employee lot, which meant in the system, my car was now assigned to be parked in 314 on B3, the space that doesn't officially exist, on top of the ramp to the level that drowned a man, in the spot where Eddie waited for it on a Tuesday and never came back up. I should have walked out. I want to be honest that the smart thing, the thing Roy begged me to do, was to walk out the front door and never come back, and let the building keep its own records. The way it had been doing for 40 years, I went down to B3 at 5:15. I told myself I was going down to take photographs, to document the permit thing, to build a case. That's a lie. I told myself on the ramp, and I knew it was a lie. I went down because the car had spent 7 weeks reserving a space for me, and I needed to know what it was waiting for. And there's a part of me, the part that let a missing man become paperwork, the part that watched his daughter walk out of a lobby and did nothing that I think needed, to finally be the one who stayed. The level was empty when I came around the pillar at B3-C. 314 was empty. Oil-stained concrete, the faded yellow number, the trickle of the drainage grate, the fluorescent tube above C, flickering its slow stutter. I stood across from the empty space and I looked at my watch, and it was 5:16. At 5:17, the lights on the whole C row cut out. Not dramatically, just off, the way they do when a breaker trips, leaving me in the spill of the working tubes one row over. My flashlight. And in the dark of the C row, I heard, very clearly, the sound of a car. Not a car arriving. A car already there. The tick of a cooling engine. The faint old song on a radio, turned almost all the way down. And under it, the exhaust fan bank kicked on and the floor shuddered. And over by the wall, I heard the little electronic chirp of a badge reader accepting a badge. My badge was in my pocket. I had my hand on it. I never took it out. When the lights came back up 6 seconds, I counted them. 6. The car was in 314. gray sedan, nose in, dead straight. And it was different from every other morning in exactly one way. The driver's seat wasn't empty. I'm not going to tell you I saw a face because I didn't. And I won't add a thing that isn't true to make this scarier. The tint and the angle and the bad light meant I saw a shape in the driver's seat, a man's shape, sitting upright, hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, the way Eddie used to sit when he'd drive his cart, the way I sit, the way a tired man who's done this a long time sits, and hanging from the rearview mirror, where there'd never been anything before, was a security badge on a lanyard. I walked up close enough to read it. It was my badge number, my photo, my name. The shape in the driver's seat turned its head toward me, slow, and the radio cut out. And in the quiet, I heard the door locks of the car go up. All four. That heavy clunk. The car unlocking itself. The driver's door, 8 inches from my hand, sitting unlocked. The space behind the wheel waiting. The seat at my exact recline. The badge with my name hanging ready. The permit upstairs, already filed under me with no end date. It wasn't waiting for the car. I'd had it backwards the whole time. The car wasn't the thing that arrived. The car was the space the building keeps for whoever's turn it is. Daniel Okafor first, then whoever after him, then Eddie. The building taking one quiet night shift man at a time and filing him away on a level it erased and reserving the next slot in advance. And the receipts and the seat and the badge were just the paperwork. The building's own incident report, filled out ahead of time, waiting for me to sign it by getting in. Eddie waited for it on a Tuesday because he recognized his own receipt and he wanted to understand. I think understanding is how it gets you. I think the moment you accept that the space is yours, you take it. I did the only thing I had left, which was the most boring thing in the world. The thing 11 years of routine had carved into me deeper than any fear. I keyed my radio and I called it in. Out loud to dispatch, to nobody, to the empty booth upstairs and the recorder that logs every transmission. B3-C, space 314, 5:19 a.m. unattended vehicle, driver present, refusing contact. I am not approaching. I am not entering the vehicle. Returning to post. I said my own name and badge number for the log, the way you do. And I turned my back on it, the hardest thing. Turning my back, and I walked to the ramp and I went up 1 level, 2 levels, into the gray morning light, coming down the entrance ramp, past the gate arm. And I did not stop walking until I was 3 blocks away in a diner with my hands around a coffee I didn't drink. The car was gone the next morning. I know because I made the new overnight guy check. A kid I trained fast and told nothing, and he reported B3 clear at 5:15 and every morning after. No car, no permit. When I went into the parking software, the reserved assignment under my name was gone, the field blank, like it had never been there. But here's why I'm giving you this statement, and why I quit 2 weeks later, and why I'll never go back to that building, or any building like it. When I pulled the audio log of my own radio call from that last morning, the call where I said my name and badge number and returning to post, and the file was there, time-stamped 5:19, the right length. But it isn't my voice on it, it's a man's voice, tired, flat, careful with the details, calling in an unattended vehicle on B3-C, and it's reading off a different name and a different badge number than mine. It's reading the new kid's name. No, the one I trained, the one I told nothing. I didn't sign it, I want that on the record. I called it in, and I turned my back, and I walked up the ramp into the daylight, and I did not take the space. But the space doesn't go away when you don't take it. It just waits. and it reserves the next one, and it fills out the paperwork ahead of time. And somewhere under that building right now, there's a level that isn't on any drawing, with a ramp that was capped before the doors ever opened, and a gray sedan parked dead straight in a space that was renumbered so it wouldn't have to be remembered, and a seat that's already been adjusted to fit somebody who tapped a badge at the B3-C checkpoint last night and thought it was just the routine. I'm telling you, so that if you ever work a quiet level on a long night and a car shows up that the system says was never there, you don't do what Eddie did and try to understand it. You don't do what I almost did and stay to see whose turn it is. You log it and you leave it, and you walk up the ramp into the light, and you find another way to make a living. And when somebody comes asking about a man who went down to do his sweep and didn't come back up, you take them seriously. You take them seriously. Don't let him become paperwork. That's the only part of this I could have done differently. And it's the only part that was ever mine to do. I don't go to parking garages anymore. I park on the street in the sun, where there's a plate on every car and a record of how it got there. And every so often, in a quiet structure somewhere, I'll catch the smell of cold concrete and exhaust and standing water, and I'll hear an exhaust fan kick on and feel it in the floor, and I'll think about a faded yellow number on a wall, and I'll go back up to the daylight, and I'll keep the space empty.